And you're now the host.
Okay.
And it is on YouTube. Good. When you were done, Ann, give me the host back. Turn me the host back.
Okay.
You go to my name on the participants and the more.
Okay. Got it.
You sure could use a few more faces out here.
Yep.
This is Frank Ippolito. Good evening.
Hi, Frank.
Hello.
There's Julian Levy. Linda Perlin.
Thank you.
Oh, shoot. Wait a minute. Sorry. Linda Perlin is coming in and Trustee Roberts are coming in. Sorry, I almost disconnected Linda. That's why I said, oh, shoot. So Eric, are you going to look for YouTube questions or should I put YouTube on my second computer? I've got like, I feel so high tech here. I've got two computers going.
It's probably better if you do it because
Okay.
the screen that I have here is the one that's going to be on YouTube or on the cable channel. So I should.
Okay. Great. Good evening, Melissa. Good evening. Good evening, Trustee Roberts. Linda Perlin, hello. We see your name. Good to have you here.
Because
I'm going to have to.
Waving time. Everybody wave.
Is this on cable?
Yes, it is, Frank. It's on both channels 17, which is the Comcast system, and 25, which is RCN.
Thank you.
It is. I hope you put your stage makeup on.
Thank you.
I'm teasing.
You want to look good.
So we are live now. As of a couple minutes ago, we're streaming. Trustee Sutker is coming into the discussion now. Good evening, Trustee Sutker. Eric, I don't recall receiving many, if any, emails from Nadia that commissioners, because normally when commissioners can't attend, they'll let Nadia know. Did I miss any today? Because I don't remember seeing.
I didn't see any. There weren't any.
Okay. Here comes Deputy Chief Fergala. She's Downers Grove iPhone. That's her.
You said what channel is it on Comcast?
Yes, Frank, on Comcast, it should be on channel 17.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Just a reminder, we are live on YouTube right now.
Well, the meeting will start in a couple of minutes. I hope we get some more bodies out here. Their faces, not bodies.
We knew what you meant. Hello, Trustee Sutker. Hello, Deputy Chief Fergala.
Hello, everybody. Happy holidays.
Thank you.
Hello. Hello. Do you hear me?
Yes, we do. Loud and clear.
Perfect.
Here comes,
Okay.
Human Relations Commissioner Alex Shapiro coming on. Hi, Alex. Welcome.
Everybody wave to Alex.
How are you?
Okay, this is really weird because on the computer I'm looking at right now, I see everything in like real time, but then my other computer, it's on a delay. So it's weird.
If you're looking at YouTube, you're going to be on delay.
Kind of weird. There we go. Okay, Karen Sherman from the Human Relations Commission is coming in now. Bear with me. Eric, I'm gonna take a really quick peek at my emails. Dennis, oh here, oh boy. Okay, Dennis Rizzo is coming in from the Public Safety Commission. Public Works Director Max Slankard and Rabbi Amy Memis Fuller from the Human Relations Commission.
Great.
And this is iPad. I'm not sure who this is, but I'll let them in and we'll find out. Hello, Rabbi.
Hello.
Hello, Paul's in. Paul, are you iPad? Did you come up as iPad? Paul Krasinski. Hello, Karen. Max. Hello, hello. Dennis. So, Dennis, do you have an ornament on the Colmar tree?
Yes, we do actually.
Do ya?
Yeah, we would have been out there for the picture, but it was my mom. We're celebrating my mom's birthday.
Oh, I'll have to go out and look for it. Okay,
Yeah.
Howard Rosenberg from the Public Safety Commission is coming in now. Eric, I just checked my emails. I don't have any emails from anyone saying they couldn't come. Alicia, is it Kate's? Alicia is coming in. I get her last name momentarily here. Cornell Collins coming in. One of our new public safety commissioners.
Well, the witching hour has arrived. You want to wait a minute or two?
I'll defer to you, Mr. Chairman. Here comes Chief, here come a couple more. Jim Becker from the Human Relations Commission and Fire Chief Jeff Hopewick.
Okay, I suspect we might as well begin the program. Again, welcome to our Public Safety Commission meeting for December. I hope everybody is staying well and happy and having a good holiday season. And we'll proceed. Now, the first order of business is the minutes. The minutes have been presented to the commission members. If there are no objections, they will stand approved as presented by the secretary. And having done that, my job is over. Over to you, Ann.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Pardon me, I'm a little distracted here because I'm still letting people in. Another individual just came in, JD. We'll have to find out who that is.
Hello, Mark.
And our Vice Chair, Mark Penny, joined us as well. So good evening. Tonight we are continuing our community review of the Skokie Police Department use of force policy. Thanks to all of the commissioners who are here, all of you are volunteers. And thanks also to Brian Williams and Lawrence Walters, the volunteers from Skokie United, who are here representing their group this evening and who have a presentation for us about the 8 Can't Wait, the tenets of the 8 Can't Wait initiative. And they've done extensive research, and they would like to present to the commissioners and staff and elected officials their findings and how they think those principles could be applied to the Skokie Police Department use of force policy. So with that said, I will turn it over. I believe Lawrence is going to share his screen, and please proceed.
Good evening, everyone, and happy holidays. My name is Williams, one of the members of Skokie United, and happy to join the commission to discuss use of force policy. I want to thank you, Ann, and the Public Safety Commission for providing us with this opportunity to present. Annie Warshaw, Matt Temkin, Lawrence Walters, and I all worked on this presentation for you this evening. This is very important to us as a resident of Skokie and as residents of Skokie, that we continue to build trust in our community police officials and village. When across the United States, there seems to be a lack of interest at times in justice. We are pleased that Mayor Van Dusen has accepted the President Obama Mayor pledge to create a dialogue and have transparency in discussing the police use of force. One concern that I will share is that much like the title of the work that we will discuss, the use of force changes cannot wait. It saves lives and holds a standard that hopefully in Skokie, Black lives will matter, and that will help us to achieve the reality that all lives will matter. So I want to talk a little bit about why 8 Can't Wait. Eight Can't Wait is viewed as a best practice, and one of the reasons why is because it's transparent. So what we share today is that it is important that we have easily accessible documents for the community, and even more important than that, our police officers are held to a standard that creates confidence from the community. It's also imperative that 8 Can't Wait is a budget neutral framework. So as you heard those 4 points, we want to continue to build trust with the community. We want to utilize all best practice. We want to utilize this budget neutral framework, especially at a time of COVID, when so many struggles to budgets have occurred, and we want to maintain transparency. So as the name says, there are 8 points to 8 Can't Wait. And as Lawrence will speak more about in a moment, these 8 policies may be found, or these 8 points may be found throughout policies across Skokie Police policy manuals. But the transparency of having them all in one space is something that I believe will speak to those 4 points that I just made. So 1, requires warnings before shooting, where possible, of course. Bans shooting at moving vehicles. Bans chokeholds and strangleholds. Any form of strangleholds or chokeholds. There's a duty to intervene with other police officers in situations. This requires comprehensive reporting, which I am aware that some of the things that the Village of Skokie and the Skokie Police Department, they require comprehensive reporting. It requires de-escalation. 8 Can't Wait policies require the use of force continuum, and it exhausts all alternatives before shooting. So that is what 8 Can't Wait is all about. Those are the 8 areas, and we're going to talk about it in more detail. Lawrence.
He's on mute.
Brian, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Hi, this is Lawrence Walters. And I've been working with Matt Temkin, Andy Warshaw, and Brian Williams to put this together. So Brian and I are just the ones here presenting it today, but it's the work of all 4 of us. So our process that we took was we looked at various documents. Number 1 being 815, the use of force policy from the Skokie Police Department. I also worked with Commander Libet from the police department. He shared a few other policies that are relevant, and that'll be clear a little bit later. So we looked through it and compared it to 8 Can't Wait, and then we actually worked with 8 Can't Wait. They have their own analysts who are actually experts in these policies, and who've looked at a lot of policies across a lot of cities. And we asked them, hey, based on A15 and then a couple other things, and then plus actually we sent them Chief Scarpelli's June letter to the community, which outlined a bunch of practices that the police department currently follow, which is awesome. But the issue is some of that stuff doesn't appear in a policy that the public can see. So we looked at it. We talked to 8 Can't Wait themselves, the people who put this program together. And so what our findings were was that if we actually look at the use of force policy itself, it only really covers 1 item in the 8 Can't Wait. And then if we include Chief Scarpelli's statement from June of 2020, it covers a total of 3. So I'm going to get into what those actually are right now. While I'm doing this, feel free to stop me and ask questions about any of this stuff when we get into the specific policies, but here are basic recommendations. So in the interest of transparency and building trust with the community, we want to house all policies that are relevant to the use of force in a single document. I understand that that's going to create some duplication. I personally think that duplication is going to be extremely low. I know that police have to look through a ton of policies and they have to learn a ton of policies and they go through months of training. I think that being the village can put its best foot forward if it houses the ones related to force and reporting of force in one single place, I think that'll show that we as a community are dedicated to this. The second point here, shift language to meet the exemplars provided below. So those will be the details I go into in just a minute. And then the other thing is, we think that, just like Brian said, these changes can't really wait. I know you've laid out this timeline for putting out a policy in May, but there's actually some actions that you could take today. I mean, number one is actually posting the policy on the website. For me to get the actual use of force policy, I emailed the village manager and he put me in touch with Commander Libet, who was actually on assignment in another area, before I actually was able to get the policy itself. So that's just not a super transparent process. The village has nothing to hide with the policy. The policy as it stands is what officers are held to, what the village is held to. So that's something that could be published literally today. So these are recommendations. I'm going to get into the details right now.
Lawrence, I'd like to stop for just
sure.
real quick moment. The use of force policy is on the website. It is included right now in the Public Safety Commission. There's a sub-page that is now part of the Public Safety Commission's page, and it's a sub-page just about this project, about the use of force community review. And the policy is posted there along with a number of other documents. That said, you're absolutely correct. It would be an easy thing to do, soon, tomorrow, to post it on a section of the police department webpage. That's something that Chief Baker and I will discuss. So thank you.
That'd be awesome.
But I want to know that it is up now. Again, not exactly where you're describing, but it is on the website. But
sure.
Thank you for mentioning that.
Yeah, no problem. No, and that's great. That's fantastic. I like that this process has actually started off on a transparent foot, which is really great. Okay, so this one's super obvious. Require a warning before shooting. So the use of force policy, the A15 doesn't actually talk about warnings at all. So this would be really easy to add. Require an explicit section that just states what warnings will look like and sound like. It doesn't have to be, the model language for this. Oh, so there's one other thing that'll actually come up later. We've actually written what we think the update should be to the policy, and we've posted it on our Skokie United website. So on skokieunited.com, there's a policy committee link at the top, and we'll share that at the end here too, where you could go and look and see what the exact language we want. I don't want to bore everyone to death with reading the exact language that we'd like. I think that could be better left to everyone on their own time to kind of sit with what we think the recommendation should be, and you can form your own thoughts around them. But this one's super straightforward. You got to give a verbal warning before you fire your firearm when it is reasonable. Obviously, there are scenarios that are too dynamic to give a warning, and that's fine. There would definitely be an exception in this rule for reasonableness. And I think if you look at a lot of the history of the law that goes into forming these policies, Graham versus Connor, which will come up later, is a big part of that, and it has a reasonableness measurement. Sorry, I'm not a lawyer, but a lot of these have a reasonableness assessment to them. All right, any questions about this? Okay, gonna move on to more.
I do.
Okay.
I actually do have a question.
Yeah.
You mentioned that there are 3 of these that are currently in the Skokie policy, because when I looked at what was sent to us in advance of the meeting, and I went to that website that said, put in Skokie, Illinois, and you can see which of the 8 are in our policy, it said 0. It said City of Chicago had, I think it said 6 or 7, I can't remember. So that was one of my questions at the end of all of this is, why are we different than the city of Chicago, and what are your thoughts? I mean, I know that you want all 8 of them in there, I get it. But I don't know if they're still voting on those couple that they don't have in, and why do we have none? And I guess that's really my question.
That's
and
a
I
great,
understand there's 3 in there already.
yeah, that's a great question. So some of it is, so the city of Chicago has 7 of 8. The one that they don't is the banning shooting at moving vehicles. I believe they partially cover it. Honestly, we talked to 8 Can't Wait in July or early August when we were first looking into this. And at that time, they weren't going to actually publish the analysis of Skokie at that point. So I'm sorry, I haven't looked back. We haven't interacted with 8 Can't Wait in the last month or 2. So I wasn't actually aware that they published their analysis of our documentation. I think you could argue that the main one that we do meet, comprehensive reporting. I think what we're asking for is some updates to comprehensive reporting. I think the reporting that we do actually meets one of the things they want. And then the other specific ones that we do that you could, based on the chief's letter, there is a duty to intervene. That is definitely in the Skokie policy, so it's not in use of force. And then I honestly forget which the third one is that we currently meet. I mean, let's be clear though, like, I think the spirit of the policy and the spirit of all the training and everything that the police department does attempt to achieve this. I think what we're asking for as Skokie United is that it just be clear and just be more transparent. Does that help answer your question?
I think so, but I think there's probably going to be a comment from the police department about what they have in there now and what this list is, and why, if we're not specifically compliant with it, why do we have the deviations that we do? I mean, there's got to be some argument on both sides for this. So I just thought I should ask that question and put it out there to better understand, because I don't know that, this body does want to have a voice on this, and we will be asked to make some type of recommendation to the trustees. And I think we need to understand that and understand, why I have an understanding why you want this in there, but why do we not, if we don't have it in there and it's kind of in there, why is it in there the way that it's in there? And you know what I'm saying? What are we missing that will accommodate all of this?
Sure. Yeah. So David, my recommendation is, if I may, I appreciate that you surfaced that. And we will, I hope, we will get into more discussion. What I would suggest is maybe if Lawrence could proceed, and then when he's gone through the bulk of his presentation, we'll get into more of a discussion.
Sure. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for the question. Okay. So then, so number 2 is ban shooting at moving vehicles. So currently the policy says, does permit shooting at moving vehicles in which a suspect is traveling. So this just creates a ban on that. It would ban shooting at a moving vehicle simply because the suspect is in it. Although there are exceptions, right? If the vehicle is trying to ram something, for example, or if the vehicle itself is the only threat, they shouldn't shoot at it, and then also make an attempt to get out of the way. Again, there's in the detailed language, there's exceptions for reasonableness, but obviously the potential to harm other people when shooting a vehicle is really large. So that's why this one is in there. All right, any questions about banning shooting at moving vehicles? Okay, so this one's a very unfortunately, this is a nuanced one, banning chokeholds and strangleholds. So Illinois law absolutely bans chokeholds. However, it does have a exception for when an officer does feel threatened. So I think we would prefer that language to actually be removed. We're not, I think the national consensus is that there's not really a defensive, there's not really a great need for a defensive chokehold. And then the other thing that this would also go a little bit further for is banning neck restraints. So I know this is a difficult topic for everyone. It's certainly a difficult topic for me, but the neck restraint that was used against George Floyd, that killed George Floyd was a neck restraint. That was not a chokehold. Illinois law and the Skokie use of force policy does not ban that neck restraint. So these kind of holds are extremely dangerous. And so we think they should be banned. And then I think an inclusion of civilian, sorry, I don't think, we think an inclusion of civilian review of these types of situations would be useful to create transparency in this.
Lawrence, could we stay on that second bullet point for a moment?
Yes.
So when you say inclusion of civilian review, if I understand that, if there were an incident, you're suggesting that civilians should be brought in as part of the review process.
That's right. And there's one later that actually the civilian review becomes a little bit more clear, but like right now, I believe the process, and obviously someone, I'm a total outsider and I'm reading the A15 document, and the way I read it and interpret it is that when there's use of deadly force, the review process ends with the chief. And if the chief wants to bring in, I believe if the chief wants to bring in the Public Safety Commission, they can. I think we should we think we should clarify that and clearly define the situations in which the Public Safety Commission would be involved in a review of a use of force incident.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Any other questions?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Okay, so this goes to the same subject, and I want to address it to Chief Baker. Who reviews the excessive force? The Board of Commissions that initially reviews excessive force on behalf of police officers?
Well, under most circumstances, it falls under our internal affairs and policy, which is an internal review. So all use of forces are reviewed internally through that policy and that process. So it's investigated by a supervisor. They do a report. It goes up to the chain of command, all the way through the chief, who signs off on it. The only exception to that would be is if there is a line of or an incident involving a death or serious physical injury, the officer involved death as a result of a use of force. So in those circumstances, we use the Illinois State Police Public Integrity Unit to do the investigation of the incident. There's still an internal review done. There's actually, in those cases, there's probably three separate investigations that are conducted. There's the internal one from our perspective on whether policies were followed. There's the public integrity one in terms of whether the line of duty death was met all the laws of the state of Illinois. And then there's a criminal investigation, most likely, with regard to the crime that the offender committed that resulted in a line of duty death. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and is that criminal investigation conducted in the second district?
Yes.
Skokie?
Yes. But for your normal uses of force that don't involve serious physical injury or death, they're all done internally.
Excellent. And I think there's a comprehensive reporting one here, and that's one of the updates. I think the great bodily harm and death scenarios, I think, would be a good place to involve some civilian oversight. All right, any other questions? Okay, moving on. All right, so duty to intervene. This one is where the duty to intervene does exist in the police policies. If I could, I have notes on where this one lives. Oh yeah, 310.40 and 370.67. I just think we think in the interest of transparency, it should be in the use of force policy. I know that can create duplication, but we think that this is so important that it needs to be out front. And then there's just minor word changes. There's wording in the policy currently about giving medical attention that it makes it seem like there's some discretion there as to when you would give medical attention to a suspect, and when we would give medical attention to a suspect, and then just make it clear about the duty to intervene and report early in the, sorry, I'm messing up that first bullet point, but you can see it. Any questions about that idea? Okay, so number 5 is comprehensive reporting. So again, this is actually something where the reporting written in the use of force policy is actually pretty good. And there's probably just a couple of things that we would like added. Again, that civilian oversight opportunities, and summarized here as require on serious events. And then one other area is prompt statement collection from officers. There's definitely some things in there that say, and actually there might be one in the, I forget where it was, whether it's in use of force about, don't take officer statements when they're really heated immediately after an incident. That may be in the union contract. Sorry that I'm messing these facts up, but we think prompt statement collection from officers would build trust. Whenever there's a delay, it just breeds mistrust of the process by the public. And we're not trying to accuse anybody of anything. We're just saying, hey, there's some simple steps we can take to make sure people trust the processes that we put in place. And then we also need to add clear expectations on release of information to the community. I think certainly some of the things that have happened this year, I think if we're as a community, if we're as a village and a police department, if we're out in front of the communications on some things, instead of people finding out about them by reading about them in the patch, if the police department or the village are leading those communications, I think it would be, it'd be better. There's a lot of minor language. Y'all can look at the whole document to see where they are, but this basically sums it up. Any questions about this? All right, moving on. Okay, so required de-escalation. So yeah, I think this is another one where the training that officers get, and again, I'm not an expert in officer training, but in talking to people, specifically, Chief Baker and former Chief Scarpelli, along with Commander Libet, there's a bunch of training that goes around de-escalation, but I think we think we need to make this front and center in the policy itself, and really put it out there that, hey, we invest a lot of training in our officers in de-escalation and in proper use of force. So let's just make it clear. So one of these is just a preface to the de-escalation section. So we wrote up a little paragraph, but basically it starts with this first sentence, which is really super straightforward. The Skokie Police Department's highest priority is safeguarding the life, dignity, and liberty of all persons. We know that's the police department's mission. We know that's what they're there for. Let's really just put it out there and make sure that everyone knows this. And that's the context of the use of force document. And then finally, add a de-escalation strategy and the various situations that go with de-escalation. One of the other things that we'll get to here in the use of force continuum is just giving people the language and tools to understand to really categorize different situations. So I'm actually just gonna jump right to the next one, because required de-escalation and use of force continuum really go hand in hand. So again, this is another place where the policies from the police department really do get at the heart of this, but it can be clearer. So we'd like the continuum of force to be more clearly defined. And then we'd like a section on a minimal reliance on force that also includes alternatives to use of force. And then, probably the easiest way for me to understand this is in the section 2A of the policy where we reference the Graham v. Connor 1986 case that really lays out like how use of force is viewed by the legal system. We just think that should be taken a little bit further. So consider situational definitions of resistance. For example, just clearer language about like the resistance level of a subject. Are they compliant? Are they passively resistant? Are they actively resistant? Are they assaultive? So framing things in that situation, framing things in that way makes it a little bit more clear what the responses should be. So then there's reasonable or proportional responses to those various situations. One of the classic things that in the model language that we would like in this policy is for example, when an officer is going to use force, they've got to consider, and this is kind of the Graham v. Connor spirit, the seriousness of the crime, the level of threat or resistance, and the risk of escape. But in the example of a traffic violation or a misdemeanor or any kind of non-violent felony, does the risk of that subject escaping require the use of force? And we think in our model policy, it does not. So again, this is not saying our policy is weak or doesn't, really have a use of force continuum. We just think it could be clearer. Any questions about any of that? Okay, moving on. So finally, exhaust all alternatives before shooting. This is another one of a case of clearing up the requirements. I think from A15 right now, it's really implied that there are these requirements for the use of deadly force, given the reference of Graham v. Connor. That's kind of it lays out how use of force will be judged and what is necessary to use force, but it doesn't explicitly mention deadly force. And so this clears it up. And the three main points, there's current immediate threat to an officer or to others, all alternatives have been exhausted and there's no bystander endangerment in using that use of force. And again, these all have a reasonableness standard applied because obviously an officer can't be expected to, to evaluate every single piece of data possible before using deadly force. So then some of the other things, the preceding tactics to using force must be de-escalatory, and I'm sure de-escalatory is a word. The idea is that we want the officers to keep in mind that they should be constantly de-escalating and they shouldn't be escalating situations to provoke a need to use force. Only immediate circumstances and threat is relevant. And so what that's really about is there's definitely going to be situations where officers are dealing with subjects they've dealt with before. And what we want to try to do is make sure that the immediate harm is the key in use of force, not someone's past. Now, someone's past might inform you as to what you think they might do next, but the idea is that we want to tend to give our community members the benefit of the doubt. Again, with the reasonableness standard applied. And then this last one, we think should be added is no deadly force in cases of self-harm. So if the only threat that a person is posing is to themselves, there's really no reason to use deadly force. So, any questions about this one? All right.
You made reference to a working oh, here you go.
Ha! Thank you. Okay. So, okay. So this is what we'd like to propose. Well, sorry. This first one is, and we can share this deck with you afterwards. You can definitely go look at the in-depth, what we wrote. And so it contains everything that I just said. It gets to be a bit of an ugly document, but it's not super hard to follow. So all the points that we've made today, the 8 can't wait reference, the current policy that we have in 815, the language that we would like added, and a little commentary on why, or what the gist of our changes would be. We'd like to have a follow-up discussion on January 13th. It's going to be an open Skokie United hosted event. After you read this, if you have questions, feel free to come and ask those questions. I realize it's out of the cycle of the use of force review. I realize that people that showed up to that would not be, representing Skokie as a whole, or the Public Safety Commission, but we'd urge you to come and ask your questions, because I realize I've just gone through a ton. And we'll obviously have a discussion right now, but and then we also realize there's an election coming up, so we're going to be having candidate dialogues where some of this, I'm sure, will come up. So yeah, skokieunited.com/policy_committee.html. And then you can always reach us at info@skokieunited.com if you have other questions about this. So that's it for the formal presentation. I'd love, Brian and I would love to answer any questions or just facilitate any kind of discussion you might have.
So I do have a request. I know you had, Lawrence and Brian, you had sent me, I think this and another document some weeks ago. I can send them out to everyone. I will also post them on the Public Safety Commission website that is, pertinent to this project. But will you just send me, like, if it wouldn't be too much trouble, it would be great for me if you could just send them to me again, because I want to make sure that I'm posting the ones that are the final versions. So, thank you.
And
so are there, sure, who has a question?
Well, go ahead, Edie.
Oh, I wanted to understand the follow-up discussion on January 13th. Is that a Zoom?
Yeah,
event?
it'll be virtual. Yep.
Okay.
And so you can email us at info@skokiunited.com and we will send you the details.
Okay, thank you.
I think Alicia had a question too.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thanks for coming and thanks for your presentation. I just want to say the last three topics that you hit. I remember, so about a year ago, the police were, they allowed the members of the Public Safety Commission to go through a training opportunity where it was an immersive experience with 360-degree screens, and the situation changed very rapidly.
Mhm.
And I just want to say that those last three topics were, I remember they were covered in that training. And I know you said that these were probably hit on in other parts of the policy, but I just want to say that even though it was just like a small demo that they did for just us, that those ideas were there. But yeah, I noticed that too, that when I reviewed the policy, I was like, oh, I didn't see those in the policy too. So
Yeah. And we totally understand that. Like, we know that training is going to do this. Let's just be upfront about it. Let's just put the words on the paper and make sure that, it's not just like, hey, do y'all train on this? Yeah, we sure do. Like, let's just tell the community that we do, because yeah, it's important.
Being as transparent as possible, knowing that the work is there, the expectations are there. It's about making sure it's visible, as we talked about, that we know that it's in one location. It's really easy to locate, but then we're following these expectations. It's not just about the almost performative effort of having it visible, but the visibility of it is very important, because we already know that if we look into enough documents, as we discussed, we're going to find a lot of these pieces, but it doesn't show up on a document based on what 8 Can't Wait has reported that looks like it's on our use of force policy. It looks like it's in many different policies, as opposed to on one document or one policy that is very easily accessible and visible to the community and public without searching and digging deeply. We're determined people, so we looked into it. And I want to give Lawrence and Matt and Annie a lot of credit for that work. But that's why we're saying, first, again, the lives of the community members, residents, can't wait on whether or not we're going to do this. It's really important that we are proactive. And I think that in many ways, we recognize that Skokie is doing the work. In other ways, we want to make sure that there are no exceptions in some of these policies. And looking through the use of force policy, there are exceptions mentioned. And that's why, as Lawrence mentioned, there's language updates we would like to see happen. We'd like to see some adjustments take place.
So I guess that was my question. So this document that you have out on skokiunited.com policy, that incorporates the current use of force policy that the police have posted, and you've added in a way that we'll be able to see the changes and suggestions from what you've put in that document. Is that what I understand?
Yeah, that's right. Although, actually, Brian, we published the report that we wrote that looks just pretty much like this.
Mm-hmm.
Did we publish the full document there? Well, after this meeting, we'll make sure that we publish the full. We have a PDF that has. Actually, if y'all hold on a second, I'll just get it. Let's see.
I guess because I understand what you were saying, that you think that there should be more clarity, and so I just thought. I thought a lot of these things I guess that's where my first question came from. A lot of these things appear to already be in the document, but what you're saying is they're there, but they're not clear enough so that they're not recognized as having met these 8 bullets.
That's right. We've got. Well, I can certainly, at least, I'm pretty sure that So what we've got out there right now, haha, yeah, we've got both of them. Yeah, Brian's on it. Okay, let me just share my screen again and I will show you. Okay, so this is that URL I listed. So on the left side is basically the document that we just went, basically the presentation I just went through with you.
I don't know that we're seeing it. Am I missing something?
Oh, yep, let me click share.
There you
Sorry. My screen share is rusty. Okay, so on the left is essentially what we just went through, an outline of the changes that we'd like. On the right is actually the document that we put together, and you can see from the outline. So here are our 8 policies, and then this actually has the current use of force policy. This is actually A15 here, so you can actually read it. You can see where we'd like to inject a few things, but like, let's go look at ban chokehold. No, I can't click on it in this format. But for example, requires a warning before shooting. This one is the easiest. So the current policy doesn't really ban it, but it does actually list shooting in a moving vehicle. It does ban warning shots. And so this ideal policy column is, we'd like a verbal warning where it's a reasonable, and then we'd like to know that it's heard within reason. And then here's our little commentary on the right. Create an explicit section that does this. So we haven't actually, so you'll also note that, if you've read the A15 policy, sometimes it's hard to figure out where to stick some of these things. And this document gets kind of, our analysis gets kind of ugly. And we haven't really gone back through and written a holistic, this is what the new document, the new use of force policy should be. But this gives you an idea of where we want it to go.
Yeah. Okay. It doesn't exactly reference where it's in the policy, but I guess you could figure it out.
Yeah, you're right. On some of these we do.
Because it doesn't reference a page in the current. Oh yeah, so this one does this reference the page in the current document? I'm just trying to figure out if there's a way to say, okay, here's what the document looks like today. This is where we're recommending to make this change, so we understand what, you know what I mean. So it's edited. So you have an edited version, and that this stuff is interjected into that edited version, so it's easy flow to read through and see what changes are you really suggesting.
Yeah,
I think that'd be helpful, but.
I know.
You've done a lot of work already, though. I understand.
I know that's the thing. Matt, Annie, me, and Brian did this work, and it was like, oh, I mean, if that's something, if y'all look at this and say, hey, this is awesome, would you give us like the track changes Word document version of it? I think we would be happy to do that, to give you like a more edited version. That's a little bit easier to follow. But I think at the same time, if this is not useful, if y'all don't really agree with this, we probably wouldn't do that work. But let's see, some of these, like here's duty to intervene that comes from 310.40, so that's not even going to be in there. But some of these other ones, let's see. So like here's the reporting procedure. So you could go and read this in, this doesn't have the section number, unfortunately. But this is the policy that we want.
Right, understood. Lawrence, we've got some people on this commission that really have a strong police background. I'm curious Anne, is it time to ask for reaction? Am I?
Yeah, we can. I have a question for Chief Baker though first, if I may. So. And we'll see if any of the commissioners care to speak. It's their prerogative, David. So
correct, I understand.
Yeah, right. So, but I do have a question for Chief Baker. And Lawrence, I guess I would ask unless there's a reason that you would like to keep your screen up, I would request that you take it down just so that it's easier for me to host the meeting if I can see everyone. Thank you.
Certainly, no problem.
No problem. Thank you. I do appreciate that. Chief Baker, I'm thinking about one of the points that Lawrence made and that was included in the presentation about when there is an incident that is a use of force incident, there's a cooling off period or a delay between when the incident occurs and when the officer or officers involved give a statement. Is that indeed a union requirement? And could you just speak to why?
I sure can. It's not a union requirement, no.
Okay.
It really only applies to line officer involved death incidents. So your typical use of force incidents, the officer is interviewed right away as to what happened, their statement is taken, the facts are gathered. Only in a line of duty death, or not a officer involved death, is there a period of time in which we wait to take a statement. And that's really based on research that's done primarily through, well, there's a lot of avenues, but Force Science Institute has done a lot of this research on how memory works in extreme stressful situations and how best it is to recapture that memory so it's most accurate. So it's based on that. It's a best practice, not only here in the state of Illinois, but nationally. And I would venture to guess that if you looked at most officer-involved death policies, which we have one, which is separate from our use of force policy, it will be in there.
Thank you. Okay, are there any commissioners who would like to speak and have questions for either Brian or Lawrence? Just going to open it up.
I've got a question.
Yes, please go ahead, Howard.
Sure. So first, Brian and Lawrence, thank you very much for putting this together, for doing the presentation. You clearly put a lot of time and effort into this, and I'm sure I speak for everybody that, I'm saying we all appreciate this. And my initial reaction is these ideas sound terrific. But I have a question about our own process. I guess this is more directed toward Ann and Paul. Before I would feel comfortable getting behind something, I would want to make sure that we got law enforcement's perspective, both current and former, quite frankly, and maybe some of the people on the commission that have a former law enforcement background would be helpful. And I don't mean to do it today, but I mean, I really would like to continue to educate myself on these ideas by hearing, to see if there's any concern or pushback, or are we creating other problems by solving these problems? So I would like to make sure that we have an opportunity to hear other perspectives before getting behind these ideas.
I appreciate that, Howard. And that is, I think what you're saying is at the heart of the timeline for this review. Again, I appreciate the work that Lawrence and Brian and Annie and their colleagues, Annie and Matt, have done, and they're going to continue to do. And I'm really delighted that they were able to give this presentation tonight. And I know that all of you and I will consider what they've presented. But the way that this process is designed is that we have 2 more meetings where we will be hearing from other community groups. Those are going to actually be a little larger because we did dedicate this meeting just to Skokie United, and we were glad to do that. And then it will be, once those meetings are concluded, if it's the pleasure of the commission to conclude them in February as scheduled, we then built in at least 1, if not 2, meetings for the commission to review everything and to talk everything over what they've heard. Now, that's not to say that there aren't some of the ideas that have been proposed tonight. For example, posting the use of force policy on the website. Again, Chief Baker and I need to talk about on the police department section of the website. Chief Baker and I need to speak about that. But that might be something that we can do. So there might be some different components of what's been presented tonight that we can move forward with, that are more just procedural or easy and simple to implement. That said, the way this process is designed, it is for the commission to take the time to hear from many different perspectives. There are 16 community groups that are involved in this process. And I believe last month there were 3 represented, so we've heard from 4. So we have 12 more to go.
Yeah, this is Joel. I'd like to just throw out something for thought. First, I'd like to say that that was a great presentation. I think transparency is truly the key. But I will also say this, and this is trying to put you in the position of seeing what or feeling what an officer goes through. So let's say, for instance, you're at home, somebody kicks your door in, and you feel your life is threatened. Think to yourself, what would you do to save yourself and your family? Now, I say that because if you are in a position where you truly feel your life in jeopardy, you're going to do whatever you can to save yourself and your family. And the reason I say that is when you're at home and that happens, that's somebody coming to you. Officers respond to those things and put themselves in jeopardy. So my point is that we need to think about the reasonableness of how we create policy. If we make it must or required or always, that will take away tools that you and I would use to protect ourselves and our family, versus giving options to the officer. And also, when we incorporate, and I do agree, if there's already case law like Graham, or if there is statute that exists like the Public Integrity Unit, that can be incorporated into policy, though it already exists. And officers, regardless of policy, are going to be held to Graham. So I just think that to think about what you would do to save a loved one or yourself when you don't know what the outcome could be, but you're thinking it could be the worst. And that's what an officer goes through and what an officer thinks about when they respond to help others. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's a super important perspective to keep in this whole process, is to keep the officer's perspective and just how dynamic these situations are. I think to use your reference of the someone, if we frame it as someone kicking down your family's door, what do you do? I would see the policies that we're putting in here, clearly respecting Graham v. Connor and the reasonableness aspect of it. But I see our policies as saying, hey, there's a back door. Take your family out the back door. Don't forget. That's an option, right? Like that's what I see this as. I don't see this as you absolutely cannot confront this this subject kicking down your door. I think what we want to put up front is, hey, confrontation is definitely an option. Use of force is definitely an option. We're not erasing the policy and saying use of force is no longer allowed. We're saying, hey, there's use of force, but there's also these other things. And we know we're already training them to do these things. Let's just put it up front.
Yeah, I wanted to add to that. Thank you, JD. The difference between someone kicking down my door and what our police officers face on a daily basis is that they're trained for that compared to me. Now, is there still trauma involved for those officers? I'm sure there is. And I want to honor that, because someone who signed up to protect and serve the communities, they deserve to be honored and recognized. I think the issue that I face is whether or not I'm a part of that being protected and served. And I want to make sure that if an officer is trained as a professional to deal with confrontation, that they have all the tools that they need and they know what their limitations are, because those limitations still include potentially the use of force that will end someone's life. And we're not saying that that is something that we're arguing for or against. We're saying that all of these expectations that we're setting creates that transparency, creates that sense of confidence from our our community, helps to maintain a sense of trust. And unfortunately, not everybody in our community and not everybody in society trusts our law enforcement right now, because there are too many incidents of law enforcement officers doing the wrong thing. And we want to make sure, when Skokie United came together and started talking about this, the conversation that was thrown around our Zoom room was, we need to be proactive. We want to make sure that our community is never caught inside of the situation that so many other communities are dealing with. And we're never going to be immune to those the questions of, was that excessive use of force or not? We're never going to be immune to that, because it's happening too much in our society that we're always going to question when there's a use of force, was it appropriate or not? It's just going to happen. But being as transparent as possible about what we're trying to accomplish here, and being on the right side of history by saying, you know what, there is no reason in the world for us to hide behind this. We respond to incidents, and we want to make sure that everyone can walk away alive, and we want to make sure that we can resolve the situation. And sometimes that means we're going to arrest people, and sometimes that means there unfortunately might be a use of force that we have to move forward with. So I would not be the person that would be able to remain completely calm if someone kicked down my door. But I expect our officers to be. I expect them to have gone through that training and have an understanding of what they're dealing and facing with, because they've been trained in it for hours, and that they're prepared to have those conversations. So I appreciate that. I respect that, but I also want that perspective to be shared.
And I agree with you 100%. And whenever there is a use of force incident, there should be scrutiny, period. There should never be a moment where someone says, oh, well, it's okay. Because, just like police reform, we should always be looking at how we can reform things to make them better. But that's not, I'm not trying to put this all in one basket in the sense of saying, yeah, you can't run out the back door. Of course you can. Just like the policy that you said, if you can get out of the way of the moving vehicle, get out of the way of the moving vehicle. But if we handcuff officers, no pun intended, to say that you must do this, then all that does is really say that to them that I can't do this. Because remember, I brought up the example of somebody kicking your door in. Well, if they show up to your house and you're in there, they don't have an option, right? They could go away, they could leave, but now they're leaving you. And that's just like you said, they're here to protect the citizens. And they're here to protect both those who are victims and those who are committing crimes. That's why it's important to render aid if you do use the force. Transparency is key. Agreed. Reform is key. Agreed. I just caution all of us to really look at, the effects of doing something without really looking at all the options. It's just something that we need to take our time and really have a conversation about. But I agree, there needs to be a look at it, and you need to look at your options. It's just not that clear cut.
If I may make an observation, I do agree with everything you said and everybody else has said. But you have 8 rules. If you have 1,000 calls by the police department, you will have 1,000 different situations. No 2 situations are identical. And to try to categorize everything and put it into a set of 8 rules, I think presents an issue. I think you have to make the rules fair and effective, but with a note that not everything's going to get covered, because everything is different when you're on the street.
So if I may just throw one more thing out, and that's in regard to what Chief Baker was saying about force science, which I'm a big fan of, and they're big on accountability. And the one thing I remember from force science was the story of an officer who actually had use of force, fired some rounds, and what he recalled immediately was the offender throwing beer cans at him. And it was odd because the bottom of the beer can looked weird. And if for anybody who goes through a moment where they have a lot of adrenaline and I don't know if any of you have ever felt this, things slow down. And so what it turned out after there was a time for him to calm down and review it and find out, it was actually the bullet casings flying by his head so that he was shooting. But the point being, in his mind at that moment, because everything is slowed down so much, it looked like a beer can. So when we talk about giving an officer time to decompress before an officer makes a statement, that's exactly why. Because if an officer told somebody taking a report, yeah, he was throwing beer cans at me, and they look all around and there's no beer cans, then they're going to think, okay, what is this officer doing? What is this? He's not thinking clearly, or she's not thinking clearly. So that is a good example of why there's a cool down period.
Are there other commissioners who would like to ask questions of Brian or Lawrence?
And I do have a question. This is Dennis.
Thanks, Dennis.
For most of these 8, it's pretty, I think, self-explanatory what the alternatives are. Maybe they're not alternatives, it's just something to do. The one that I has some hesitation with is the banning of the chokeholds and strangleholds. And so I'm just wondering, my hesitation is not in necessarily banning it. My hesitation is in what's the alternative in the situation. As our chairman mentioned, there's 1,000 different situations, right? But surely one of those would be a situation where an officer feels his life is threatened, and he is maybe struggling with the suspect, or maybe there's 2 officers, then that suspect is overpowering them, and maybe there are no other options, at least none that I know of. And so that is my question. Have there been any discussions, with the 8 Can't Wait group, or even amongst yourselves, in a situation like that? Is there another option? Or does the officer then just have to relinquish himself to oversimplify it, to just giving up at that point? And so I know I'm sort of thinking out loud here, but the main question is, have there been any options to chokeholds and strangleholds offered by 8 Can't Wait or any other groups?
Well, I'll share what we talked about. When we were discussing this, we talked about an officer's variety of options to respond to a hostile situation. An officer has a taser, has a baton, has mace, may have a canine, has a gun, may have additional officers present. I think there are a lot of responses that officers are trained in, and we don't need additional George Floyd scenarios happening in Skokie. We don't need it happening anywhere. So if there's a person who is fighting back, I think we have to think about, why were the officers called out? Why is this person in whatever state of mind this person is in? Are the officers the best person to respond initially? We need to think about all of the options when we're thinking about, what does responding to an incident look like? Who should be the first person responding? What is the best way for us to address any kind of possible violent situation? And I think all the de-escalation discussions that Lawrence mentioned earlier is a part of those tools, without ever pulling out a less than lethal option. Is, how do we de-escalate? Now, I've witnessed police officers in Skokie de-escalate tense situations. I've spoken with the chief. I've spoken with, at the time, Deputy Chief Brian Baker. I mean, we've had dialogue about issues that have happened in the community. I've talked to other officers about that. I know that these officers are trained to make quick decisions, but they're constantly trained, and their minds are primed to be responsive that way. They are unique individuals to be put in the positions that they're put in, that people who've never experienced something like this will never understand. And when I think of our officers, and I think of the power that they wield every day they're going out, and the fear they may also wield at the exact same time, I think that is the reason why we need these precautions. That's why we need these policies. That's why we need to make sure that not only are we protecting the residents of our community, but we're also protecting those officers. We're making sure that we can have a community that people don't have to worry about whether they're going to be the next George Floyd, whether they're going to be the next victim of what looks and feels like police abuse or is just simply police abuse. We don't need that in Skokie. So I think when we're talking about like, who are we centering in this process? Who are we talking about? Who are we thinking about needs this support? We need to think about everyone involved, but we really need to talk about the residents of the community. And if residents of the community are going to test our officers, knowing that they seemingly are handcuffed, as the phrase was used earlier, then unfortunately residents are going to not end up on the right side of the scenario, because officers are trained with multiple steps. It's not just pull out your gun and shoot. It should not be chokehold. It should not be those things first. It should be, let's figure out ways to address this. And I know that they're already trained in those things. The other question is, how frequently or how often can officers be trained in de-escalation? Are they being trained often enough? And if they're not, what can we do as a community to change that, so that we don't have to worry about, well, let's not prevent these officers from having all the tools they need. Let's make sure they have all the resources they need so they can always make the best decision.
You know, Brian, I agree with you. Training is key. But I would say one thing, and I think every single person in this session now and listening at home, and every officer out there realizes what happened to George Floyd was a tragedy. It was wrong, and it is not condoned by any police department. I think it's important to note, though, that what happened was a criminal act, and that the officer did something that was clearly a violation of any policy. Also, because George Floyd was handcuffed and he was on the ground, and no defensive tactics program anywhere will show you that you should be using any type of restraint like that while someone is in that position. On top of that, it is never an approved tactic to kneel on somebody's neck. That is not trained anywhere. So I think when we look at the idea, and I see the point that was made by Dennis, when we look at the idea of chokeholds, yes, we should not do them 99.99% of the time. But if an officer has no other remedy to save his or her life, I'm hesitant to say that you will never do that, because that might be the only option they have. And if that's the case, then how do we address it in other ways? We need to address it in training. Absolutely. We need to address it in de-escalation training. Absolutely. And I know we do that through our CIT, our crisis intervention teams, and that training, which is, I think it's great to know that it's almost impossible to get into class nowadays in Illinois, because everyone is going. Of course, it's mandated, but everyone is going. So this is I've always said to those that I've supervised, it is much easier to escalate than de-escalate. You need to start low before you ever go high. And once you do go high, you have to be trained in how to bring it back down. And I think we agree there. I think we agree that that's where we need to get through to. And that requires training. It also requires having enough officers on the street to make sure that we can have officers come off the street to do training while other officers are protecting the community. So I think we agree in a lot of ways here. I think it's just the really fine points of, restricting officers when there is no other choice.
I think that's a valid point, JD. Like, if there's absolutely no other choice, I think we need to have solutions in place. And I think I mentioned a number of them. However, I also realize that things can escalate quickly and get out of control quickly. And then we can always look back at it and say, well, we should have done this and we should have done that. Like, there's always going to be scenarios like that, whether it was, oh, you dropped the eggs on the floor. But the eggs we can throw away. lives we shouldn't and cannot. And I think it's really important for us to always consider the lives of everybody involved in a situation. And I think the reason we're even having this conversation and being transparent, which I appreciate again, Mayor Van Duzen, making sure we are in a position and we've agreed to and we've pledged the Obama pledge to do this work, is because of scenarios that happened with George Floyd and multiple other people who have been in multiple different ways murdered. That's why we're having this conversation. So if we decided, you know what, we can't do chokeholds. We have to do everything under our power to never ever do chokeholds, to never even want to pull out our weapons, any form of our weapons. We have to do everything in our power to make sure that we're not just trying to intimidate someone, which again can escalate a scenario. So I think you're right. There's those really fine print sort of scenarios that we're never going to be able to discuss in advance. And I think someone does that work, and that's what they get paid to do. Maybe it's not us, but that is what they get paid to do. They get paid to think about scenarios, and they get paid to talk to people about their experience and their perspective of how they de-escalated it. And they get paid to say, this is how it went completely wrong, and this is what I should have done differently, so that you never have to go through that. So you're right. You're right about how fine the print is and how we might try to get into the micro level, but the reality is we're not going to go there today. We're not going to go there throughout this process. But I think it's really important that we just have that transparent process and we work and provide the training. And if CIT training could be expanded, Skokie takes the lead on so many things as a police department. It'd be wonderful if they can take the lead on CIT training, if that was possible. And you're right. How do we make sure people are trained if they're on the street doing the work? The work is also the training.
Thank you. This is a really good, really valuable discussion, and I appreciate everyone's perspectives. Other commissioners, we've got a few minutes left here. Anyone else? Commissioners? Questions? Okay, there being none, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to turn it back to you. One last thing, though, I would again like to thank Brian and Lawrence and their colleagues in the Skokie United group for all your work and your care and concern for our community. So thank you. And thanks to all the commissioners and elected officials for being on the call this evening. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having us. We really appreciate this open forum.
Chief Chairman Patelis, back to you.
Thank you. Thank you for the intro again, Ann. And thanks everybody for coming. Thanks to our guests. I think we did have a good discussion. And of course, these words will be considered when we finalize our report to the mayor. As has been said, we have a process. We're going to follow it, and we will consider everybody's point of view. And thank you all for coming, or thank you all for signing in. And we will now adjourn the meeting. See you next month.
Hi, everybody. Thank you all.
Happy Hanukkah.
Among others.
I'm just going to say happy holidays to everybody.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays, everybody.
Stay safe. Bye.
Make me the host.
Night, everyone.
Happy holidays.
I'm trying. I've got, my screen is doing some weird stuff though. There you go. You should be the host now, Eric.